Let's turn now to other causes of hypersomnolence. Not every patient has obstructive sleep apnea. When they're drowsy, it's not necessarily obstructive sleep apnea syndrome. So central hypersomnias, when you think about this, is where there's a problem in neurologically in their brain. Then there's narcolepsy. So again, this is another sleep condition. Then there's an idiopathic hypersomnia. We don't really know why. Recurrent hypersomnias, sleep-related movement disorders. Because of the movement, it's actually disrupting sleep. Circadian rhythm sleep disorders, they're actually out of sync with their environment. So because of that, now this is something that typically happens to teenagers, but it can be affecting adults as well. They get out of sync with their environment. And then of course there's drug induced, whether that's prescription or otherwise, but drugs that actually make people feel very, very drowsy. Behavioural issues and perhaps other medical conditions, but these all have an impact and can make people hypersomnolent. Let's come back then to OSA and then look at the consequences of OSA upon the body. So laser pointer time. Okay, well, the obvious one really is fatigue. So we have unrefreshing sleep because the patient cannot sleep and breathe at the same time. Typically they wake up with a morning headache, and then let's get serious, strokes and seizures. This is not a condition that should be taken lightly. Nocturnal choking, coughing and shortness of breath. So we feel it here. And then nocturnal chest pain, angina, myocardial infarction, heartburn, palpitations, heart failure, arrhythmias and hypertension. People die. This is a very serious thing. Perhaps it's not just, you're not going to see it listed that the patient died of obstructive sleep apnea, but they died of heart failure. Well, they died of heart failure because they had untreated obstructive sleep apnea. Now this is a really good graphic to illustrate the difference between obstructive and central apnea. Now again, we need our laser pointer. So start at the top, we have a patient that's awake and then asleep. And then what we can see is that there's a similar situation for the airflow. The airflow has stopped. But why is that? Well, let's look at this one on the horizontal axis. There's chest wall movement with obstructive apnea. So there's a continued effort to breathe up, down, up, down, up, down. There's a drive to breathe. But on the central side, there is no drive to breathe. This is why ambulatory home sleep testing, for example, and PSGs, this is why we have the chest belts. We want to see that there's an effort to breathe or not. If there is no effort to breathe, if you didn't have the belt, you'd see no airflow and you wouldn't know whether there's an obstructive or a central event. Okay. Now why is that important? It's important because it dictates what is an appropriate therapy. You wouldn't want to put a patient getting into positive airway pressure therapy. You wouldn't want to treat the patient with central apnea with positive airway pressure therapy, a constant continuous positive airway pressure therapy, because you make the situation worse. Okay, so this again is an example of a tracing, a hypnogram, and you can see hypopnea and obstructive apnea. So what do we see? So here is no airflow, and then you can see there's the arousal on the EEG, and a big movement, a big effort to breathe. On the rib cage, that's the chest and the abdominal belts. And you can see there's the delayed desaturation. So they had an apneic event. So no airflow, and then there's the effort, the drive to breathe afterwards. It's like a heroic breathing to actually probably accompany with a heroic snore and also an arousal, they come to actually start to breathe again. And this is a hypopnea, and you see the airflow is actually quite diminished, but there's a continued effort to breathe abdominally. Yeah? But there's only a small desaturation. This is hypopnea meaning under breathing.